Background. Let's give it a go. So what I'd like to talk about this weekend is the changing face of Mythic raiding, really. Now, I've sort of talked about this before. Mythic raiding is sort of very different, or raiding is different in one. You get differences in every expansion. Every expansion, the format has changed. They spice it up quite a lot. So it's one of those things. If someone comes back to raiding after a full expansion or something like that, there'll be certain aspects they'll recognise, certain aspects that are still the same. Quite a lot of changes they'll notice as well. Now, when Mythic raiding was introduced, or was going to be introduced at the end of MOP for WoD, I just thought it was a change of name. All right, because the hard mode had been heroic for quite a long time. Heroic, the idea of two different modes or two different difficulties on the same boss was introduced in Ulduar in a very different way. I mean, heroic has not just been the same since Ulduar, and now it's just changed. It hasn't. It's changed a lot since Tier 8. But yeah, I just thought, oh well, what they're doing is Flex. They developed Flex during Siege of Orgrimmar, really successful, and they want obviously to develop it further for WoD, and it's worked really well, I think. But they wanted a couple of difficulties so that people could progress using the Flex mode of raiding. So they had normal and heroic, and I just thought, okay, with the hard mode, with the fixed raid size, they're just calling it Mythic just to have a different name because they needed a different name. It's not quite worked out like that. There are a number of changes to raiding, full stop, but that make Mythic raiding, I would say, more challenging than the heroic raiding was in MOP. Now, a few things that I have mentioned before as well, like battle reses. You used to get a set number of battle reses, so when it was the old 25-man heroic, you got 3 battle reses to use, whenever. The fact that now you get 1 battle res and it takes a certain amount of time to build up more battle reses is actually more difficult, because when you first learn a fight, you're likely to use several battle reses if you had several battle reses at the start of a fight, because people will die. People will die straight away on a difficult boss when you're first pulling it. So I'll res them up, res them up. By resing them up, it allows you to push further in, and you learn the fight more quickly because you can push further in, further in, further in, with people still making mistakes. Now, you really need everyone to learn the very, very first part of a fight before you can go any further. There are some bosses, you look at the likes of, say, Manaroth or Zul'Harak on Mythic mode, and you look at a guild on its first night, and it's probably going to get its arse kicked all night long with pulls that last about a minute, a bit over a minute maybe, with a few that it pushed before because people have sorted themselves out. So it's a lot tougher. Something else is tied to tuning. The fixed raid size, not having to have 10 man and 25 man, means they can tune the fights a lot more tightly. So it's very difficult to sort of carry anyone if someone is playing very poorly, especially if it's pull after pull. They're going to hold you back. You are going to wipe because of them, and that's all there is to it. You've also got, because of the fixed nature of it, you've got different encounters that will have specific mechanics that you'll need a particular class's utility to deal with, because they reason that you will have all classes available to you. They couldn't do that before, because in a 10-man guild, there are more than 10 classes, okay? So it wasn't reasonable to expect 10-man guilds to be able to cope, to be able to have every utility at their disposal. Now they do, which still causes problems, because still is the case that sometimes you might not have that, and then you have to recruit it, and that's I'm 2 minds whether that's a good thing or not, but it is a thing. Regardless, it is a thing. There are also more important phases of fights where sometimes overall damage has to be sacrificed, more so than it used to be. I'm not saying it's been the case up until WoD that if you just do your maximum overall damage then you'll do well. You did do in the early days, but there are more fights now when in actual fact you've got to focus on a particular important phase to use your cooldowns on, or for whatever else that might not mean your overall damage at the end of the fight is all that brilliant. And of course people don't like doing that. It's something else to hold you back. So people padding meters and looking at percentiles on World of logs or Warcraft logs, that sort of thing is death to your raid group, until farm. When it's on farm, obviously go nuts, but yeah, when you're on progress, that sort of thing will hold you back. So people's indiscipline on that, it's quite a clever move on Blizzard's part. I would say, this is sort of my opinion on the next one, there's more interplay with mechanics. There are more little things to do to, other than just DPS for a DPSer, to help move the fight along. Even from a positioning point of view, I think there are more fights where you have to consider your position than there used to be in, say, MOP, where a lot of the time you'd be stacked up on a particular point and you'd be told to stand on that point. I think there are more fights where you've got to sort of work that out for yourself. I think there are more fights now where interplay with the environment is really important as well, my opinion. But I feel that compared to the raids in MOP, which I also thought were very good. Now, all of this has basically made Mythic raiding very different experience to heroic raiding, and actually quite a bit tougher. Now, if you just discuss all those changes, it's pure opinion, it's pure conjecture to say that it's harder. But there has been something that has very definitely changed in raiding, and there are other possible reasons for it, but I'm just going to focus in on the raiding now. And that is that there are not as many Mythic... The game has lost Mythic raiders, Mythic quality raiders. Now, I speak from experience on this one because I've sort of now just moved into my third guild this tier. I mean, that's... Whoa. It's pretty unlucky if you decide you want to change guilds mid-tier. Some people do. But to change it twice in one tier, I mean, normally that's like the actions of a guild hopper. You think, ooh, what's going on there? Now, what has happened in the past, I had a sizable break, actually, in Wrath and Kata, so I missed most of both of those expansions. I was there for one tier in each of them, as a serious raider, that is, not as a casual. But I've still been raiding since like tier 1 and most of the tiers. And it's the same process when you join a guild, and it doesn't matter what sort of guild you join in. You first of all search it out and check that you think it was suitable for you, and then you write an application. And then, you know, if it passes muster, then they invite you, blah, 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 blah. Now, I've been a recruitment officer in a number of expansions, including this one, including this tier. Now, I've always been very proactive about going to find people. I have gone out looking for people, and I think I even did that in vanilla. I would. Some people call it poaching players or headhunting. I used to nick them. I used to nick players. I used to go, like, when you're all in the same realm, there was none of this realm transfer back in vanilla. I used to I'd go on like pugs. It was quite common to do pug dungeons, even raiders. And you'd go on a few and you might spot a bit of talent and they were in a guild further behind on yours. And you'd sort of talk about them a bit subtle, you know, and nick them and get them in your guild. And I've always been proactive like that. So even very recently, I try and look. If you look on WoW Progress, I promise you now, there are so few players. It used to be the case even just a couple of years ago. If you wanted a player, it's like, if you want a player of a particular class, I can find you one in a few days. If you want a really good one, give me a couple of weeks. Okay? So let's hope we're not in a real hurry. Give me a couple of weeks and I'll find a real good one. Now, hardly any. You look on WoW Progress, there's actually very, very few, particularly for the most needed classes. The typical classes that are always a safe bet to play, if you're good at them. Warlock, Mage, Rogue. Okay? There's a few others that are strong this tier as well, but those three are always strong. They're just always strong, if you're good. Okay? There are plenty of, you know, poorer quality players of those classes. Now, if you look on WoW Progress, and if I was trying to pick one that was a really good one, there's not many. There's the odd one. There's not many. Really not many. And it's quite hard. But there's a lot of guilds wanting them. So the competition is fierce. So what I tried to do is you try and be on the lookout. I would look at people on WoW Progress that are advertising looking for a guild that I didn't necessarily want. So I'd look at all classes, whether I want it or not. Just to see, because some people put a little note in there, which is good. You know, explain the situation. And some people put a little note saying their guild disbanded. Straight away, I would look that guild up and see who's still in their roster and see if I can get them. Before, because certain players have advertised themselves as looking for a guild, I would try and get in early. Now, just to bring this to the personal experience, so I left a guild that I'd been in with over a year for reasons. At some point, you know, sometimes I'm a stubborn so-and-so. If something isn't being done exactly as I'd want, well, not exactly. I am not unwilling to compromise, but, you know, something was done slightly differently that I went, no, that's not for me. I don't get any enjoyment out of the game doing it that way. So I left. I applied to a guild. Didn't get in that one. But the weird thing is, I've not applied since. I was actually contacted by a number of guilds. And this has never happened before. It's like, I can understand people like in top guilds being approached and things like that. And certainly I have approached people. But, there were several guilds that contacted me and I thought, oh, this is a bit different. Maybe what I am doing as a recruitment officer is becoming more the norm. More people are proactively going and approaching people. And then this guild, unfortunately, after about a month, has collapsed. A lot of people left the guild to stop raiding or for whatever other reason. It was a shame. It was doing quite nicely. But replacements needed to be found very quickly, and some replacements were not able to cope with the fights in quite the same way. So a lot more wipes than is good for spending time on progress. And so the guild leadership made the decision to sort of call it a day. They attempted a merger with another guild. That fell through. Called it a day. So there I was looking for another guild. At this point, I didn't even look at other guilds to write an application for, because after that first experience a month earlier, I just went onto WoW Progress. I'm looking for a guild and see what comes in. Next day, came back from work, there's 5 people contacting me. And I'm thinking, this is... Because, Retribution Paladin, a lot of guilds do without them completely. Most guilds that want one have got one at this stage of the tier. So not one of the classes that everyone's clamoring for, and you would expect those guilds who do appreciate us would have got theirs as well. I was not expecting lots of guilds to be looking, and so you look on WoW Progress. If you put yourself in as a Retribution Paladin, which guilds are looking for Retribution Paladin, you get a great big list up, and it looks, oh, there's quite a lot. But actually, when you look at those individual guilds and what their requirements are, a lot of them have got either all classes in which case they're not specifically looking for Retribution Paladin, it just says all classes, or they might have Retribution Paladin down, but it says low. So you don't really see guilds at the upper end in Mythic Progress actively saying we're looking for one. But I'm still getting people approaching. It's like, this is really weird. It's actually not all it's cracked. It sounds great as well, lots of offers. Actually not all it's cracked up to be, because there were a number of tempting offers, and I've gone with one for reasons. I'm not going to name any guilds, but I hope I made the right decision. I hope I've gone with the right decision. But that's for later on. But as I say, in terms of the changing nature of raiding, and I think this, because this is not normal, I've not had this before, where you flag yourself as looking at a guild and you get so many people showing interest. We're interested in perhaps recruiting you. So there's not even an application process at the moment. It's like, do you want to join? Or, sometimes after a talk, they don't necessarily just say, do you want to join? Just based on the fact you're advertising. They'll look you up. They can only see so much in logs anyway, and by asking around. So they want to talk to you and things like that as well. But, yeah, very, very different. And I there's only two real things I think can contribute to this. One is there's not enough Mythic Raiders to support the number of Mythic raiding guilds. So the good quality Mythic Raiders, the ones who can cope with the mechanics, especially at the upper end on the harder fights, are spread too thin. I can think of no other explanation. If anyone can, put it in the comments, but I cannot. Now, the cause for this, okay, there are a few things it could be. One is, it is noticeable a lot of guilds do break up on certain fights. Some guilds broke up on Gore Fiend, a big speeding bomb of a fight. A lot of guilds, including the one I've just left, it's on Manaroth. They seem to be fights that break a lot of guilds. And a number of them, and this baffles me, there are a number of guilds, not necessarily breaking up, but struggling and having people leave the game on Archimond. And it's like, surely you can just push for one more boss. But no, there's something really driving good quality Mythic Raiders out of raiding. And I don't know whether it is the nature of Mythic raiding, which, Blizzard have said they're very happy with, and I am not going to criticise it. Or is it something, just thinking, off the top of my head here, is it again related to the general problem of WoD, that nothing to do outside of raiding? The raiding is awesome, by the way, in this game. I would say that to Blizzard. The raiding is absolutely awesome. But even raiders want to do something outside of raiding hours. And perhaps people are feeling that the only thing to do is raiding. So all they're doing in this game is raiding. And maybe some people are just getting a bit burnt out by that because that's all they're doing. You know, even though typically even very serious raiders don't raid as much as used to do. Obviously the top end, you know, you do. They still raid all the hours God sends pretty much when the new content's out. They're the ones who are going to go for the top world ranks. But the ones after that, you know, it was quite typical when the game first came out, even for mediocre guilds, to raid every night of the week. Now it's 3 or 4 nights usually. The odd one still does 5. Quite rare though, it's usually 3 or 4. And there's a number of weekend guilds who, okay, although they might raid 2 days, they usually have much longer raiding sessions, so they're actually raiding the same number of hours as a 3 or 4 night guild. They do pretty well. So there's a lot of raiding between the sort of 12 and 16, 17 hour schedule, doing pretty well, doing very nicely. But they're still leaving. So, you know, it's not the schedule itself. I don't think that's too onerous a schedule. What do we think the reasons for this? I'm actually really interested because I really can't think of anything other than those 2 things. One is the nature of Mythic raiding, but for serious raiders, is it really too much? I don't know. Is it a domino effect? Is it the fact you get into a raid and because like particular key classes like warlocks and mages are noticeable for there not being very many of them that can play at a certain level, and then you find it more difficult to replace them, and then you replace them with people who are not actually that brilliant. They might be okay, but they're not that brilliant, and of course they're going to cause a few more wipes than you're comfortable with, and maybe that gets on people's wick and they don't like the number of wipes and they get fixated on that. Perhaps there's perhaps an issue there, or is it simply that there's no wind down? You know, if you want to wind down, you go and play something else. You go and play Diablo 3, maybe another Blizzard game, maybe a completely different game, Counter-Strike, something like that. Let me know what you think. But I do. There's just from this fact that I've now joined my second guild without having to do an application, I'm thinking there's something definitely different about Mythic raiding now. But anyway, those are my thoughts. See what you think to this as well, the old background, see if that's any better, or just cast out to look at me and just tell me, just do your voiceovers. See you later.